Chapter 4.
The nudge that finally awakened Lando was provided by a dehydration headache and a stomach knotted with hunger. The dream that lingered in his awareness was of being pursued through a dark city by a soft-voiced, unseen assassin, and he was eager to chase it from his senses. Reaching up, he switched his helmet lamps to the low setting and looked for the others. Lando found he was the only member of the team who was conscious. Lobot was floating near the wall below him, a few meters away. His arms were raised beside his face, and his legs drawn up and bent at the knees like a child's. R2 was still holding 3PO protectively with his grasping claws, and the duo spun slowly in the air at the far end of the chamber, as though dancing to music only they could hear. Glancing down at the controls on his left forearm, Lando checked the timer he had started before closing his eyes. He was startled to see that the 6-hour rest he had proposed had stretched to more than 16 hours. He and Lobot had both slept through their alarms, and the droids were still powered down, waiting for an awakening touch. For a moment he felt a flash of guilt over the lost hours, but he swept that away with the realization of how necessary the rest had been. The body knows what it needs, he thought, looking at Lobot's blissful expression. But sleep had not healed all the insults. Lando's hunger was keener than ever, and the water from the helmet pipe straw only spurred wishful thoughts about bottomless, ice-filled glasses of Charda and Skoa. More than anything, though, he wanted out of his contact suit. The air inside was decidedly rank, and his own breath came back to him off the sneeze-spotted faceplate as a foul cloud. His scalp and a half-dozen other unreachable places itched maddeningly. His skin felt greasy, and he craved a hot shower, and the suit was a prison preventing him from stretching out tight muscles and deep aches. The makeshift glove on Lando's right hand was clinging lightly to his fingers, a sign that the atmospheric pressure in the compartment was slightly higher than the one normal of the suits. Lando began fingering the helmet release with his other hand, absently betraying his thoughts. It's not as if there's anything poisonous in the ship's air. It's just a bit on the chewy side. I held my breath for 6 minutes once in a tank test. That's plenty of time to wipe my face and scratch my... Lobot's voice interrupted Lando's thoughts. I would like to know, the cyborg said, which agency you used to make the arrangements for this vacation. The accommodations have not been up to expectations. An easy smile creased Lando's face as he turned toward Lobot.
You're just cranky because I ate your complimentary breakfast while you were sleeping in.
Which is just one of several hundred reasons why I'm never traveling with you again.
Stop complaining and help me wake up the children,
Lando said.
I hear today's going to be one of the highlights of the tour.
By mutual agreement, they activated 3PO first, so that Lando could have a few minutes to diagnose his status without R2's protective interference. It took only a short conversation with 3PO to discover that the droid had regained most of his verbal faculties, and with them most of his dignity. All that remained of his vocal injury was a background buzz when he spoke, and an intermittent glitch in the speech synthesizer that resulted in various distortions in pitch. 3PO, I'm very glad your language systems came around, said Lobot. I may have to raise my estimation of Breton Engineering cybernetic products. My first neural interface was from Breton, and I had nothing but trouble with it.
Thank you, Master Lobot,
said 3PO.
I, too, am greatly relieved. A protocol droid with a malfunctioning synthesizer is hardly any use at all.
Unless you want to do business in one of the 9,057 sign languages,
said Lando. The droid looked down at his damaged arm.
In my present condition, I would not be able to offer you even that service. If my synthesizer fails, I would be nothing but a burden to you. You might as well cannibalize my power cells and leave me behind. I understand.
We're not going to leave you behind, said Lobot. I don't want to have to depend on me to communicate with R2.
Why is that?
Lando asked.
You seem to be doing fine back in the passage.
Lobot shook his head slowly. R2 thinks in that same binary polyglot he speaks, and I can't understand a bite of it. He can leave short messages in BASIC for me in his memory registers, but that limits us to whatever he knows of BASIC. And from what I've seen so far, he seems to have learned most of his BASIC vocabulary from a nerf herder.
Oh, he can be quite rude.
3PO agreed conspiratorially.
He constantly says the most outrageous things. You can't imagine. I don't do a repeat half of his comments. Sometimes I think that he means to trick me into embarrassing myself.
3PO looked past Lando to where R2 was floating at an angle, his standby lamp still glowing, and added worriedly,
He hasn't been damaged, has he?
No, he's just the last one up this morning.
Lando said.
I'm gonna take care of that right now.
Perhaps it would be better if I did it, Lobot said, stopping him with a touch. R2 may not have recovered from 3PO's accident as well as 3PO has.
Just how many diplomats are on this mission?
Lando asked lightly.
No, if R2 still has a problem with me, he can start getting over it right now. This is my mission, and I'm not handing it over to a petulant droid. No offense, 3PO.
None taken, I'm sure,
said 3PO.
I know exactly what you mean.
R2's system lights came on all at once, and his sensor dome rotated a half turn in each direction. Rising, he moved away from Lando and jetted toward 3PO, loosing an unusually long chatter of sounds.
What's he saying?
Lando asked. 3PO chattered back at R2 in the same dialect before answering, and R2 replied at even greater length.
Well?
A crackle of static made it sound as though 3PO had cleared his throat.
Master Lando, R2 says that he has the greatest enthusiasm and confidence in the mission.
3PO?
Lando, I suggest you take it at face value, Lobot said quietly. Lando looked hard at Lobot for a moment. Then, frowning, he said,
Thank you. I have trouble sometimes hearing clearly over what's not being said.
He reached for his control pad and brought his helmet lamps up to full brightness.
Lobot, is there anything going on outside?
All of the limpet sensors are clear. The Vagabond's forward speed is negligible.
Just another oblong asteroid, drifting along a long way from anywhere, eh? All right then, R2, can you help us with some light? Let's see what we have here.
What they had was a chamber 15 meters long and 9 meters wide, and as infuriatingly seamless and featureless as the airlock.
Kinda have the feeling that I've been here before,
said Lando, scanning.
And I don't mean yesterday when I burned through here on the way to the hull.
I understand, Lobot said. Perhaps the highest form of art on Keller was the locked room mystery. Lando laughed.
Which would make this ship their Hall of Fame anthology, I guess. But it wants for variety.
The apparent consistency of design principles should serve our interests. A grin appeared.
You want me to see if I can lose the other glove this time?
The Keller aesthetic demands that nothing be evident until it is needed, Lobot said. But how does the structure know when a concealed feature is needed? How do the Keller communicate their desires to their creations? We know at least one answer. We know that it responds to touch. The grin faded to a frown.
The last time I touched this ship, it tried to leave us out as a meal for space slugs.
I am not convinced that this vessel means to do us harm.
What exactly would you consider compelling proof? A fatality?
I've been reconsidering the incident in the airlock in light of 3PO's accident, Lobot said. It's possible that we misinterpreted the message which R2 found in the airlock. It's possible that the control you activated was an emergency lock-close switch, which functioned exactly as intended.
What? No, that doesn't make sense.
It's even possible that we asked the Vagabond to attempt an escape, Lobot continued. The prominence given to the symbology R2 detected parallels the use of red and yellow as alert and caution colors, and arrows as pointers in human artifacts.
You're saying that if 3PO could read Kella, we'd have seen a sign saying, "In case of emergency, pull here."
Lobot nodded. Isn't the most prominent marking on the outside of a snub fighter the canopy release? What if we walked up to one, knowing the meaning of an arrow, but unable to read the word rescue?
Here's the problem with your theory, that we hit the panic button.
Lando said.
The next time this ship had a chance, it tried to spit us out again, without us ever getting near that control yoke.
That next time we were burning a hole in an element of the primary defense system, a hole that the repair mechanisms were unable to close in the usual amount of time.
I take your point,
Lando said.
But after we did that, the ship must have known we weren't Kella and we weren't friendly.
If the ship had the consciousness you attribute to it, and had formed an intent to remove us, it could have done so at any time while we were in the accumulator, said Lobot. It could have disposed of us while we slept just now. It could have opened the hull under your feet while you were placing the limpet. Yet it has done none of these things.
And what kind of security system would forget about us once we'd managed to break in, eh?
Lando said.
As though once we put our weapons away, we were no longer suspect. Terribly sorry, forgot our key code, had to blow up the entryway. Oh, that's all right. Come in and make yourself comfortable.
I've been asking myself from the beginning what kind of intelligence we were facing, Lobot said. It's the most interesting question before us.
I'm still going with, where's my next meal coming from?
Lando said.
And R2 would probably vote for who put him in charge anyway.
Lobot patiently waited out the interruption, then went on. I have projected how this ship would behave if you or I or R2 or 3PO were its master. Its real behavior does not match any of these models.
Pardon me, sir, but why should it?
Asked 3PO, who had been listening attentively.
This vessel is not built by humans or droids. We are not its masters. Its behavior can only be properly evaluated in the appropriate cultural context.
I disagree, 3PO. The conditions of the test dictate the form of the answers, said Lobot. If that were not so, the millions of species in this galaxy would have so little in common that there would be no need for your services.
He's got a point, 3PO,
said Lando.
No matter where I've gone or who I've been dealing with, the one thing that holds the deal together is that everyone's looking out for their own end. I call it enlightened self-interest, and it's the motor that powers the universe.
The conditions of the test are sentience and survival, said Lobot. The form of the answer is to identify and neutralize threats. This ship has failed the test. Therefore, I conclude this ship is neither sentient nor controlled by sentient beings. It is a work of great ingenuity, but it is not intelligent.
I see,
said 3PO.
Master Lando, should I discontinue my efforts to contact the masters of this vessel?
Just hang on, 3PO,
said Lando.
I'm still not sold on this. Lobot, a ship of this size and complexity, successfully evading capture for more than 100 years. There must be something or somebody in charge.
Something, yes, but not something sentient. I believe we were deceived by the apparent complexity into invoking a God hypothesis.
A God hypothesis?
Lobot nodded. When we spoke of the masters of this vessel, we assumed there was a consciousness observing us and controlling events in our environment, he said. We even turned to these masters to save us, respectfully offering entreaties and hoping for their intervention on our behalf. But there's no indication the ship is aware of us, beyond its local awareness of our effects on it. Its responses have the character of autonomic functions. I now believe the Vagabond is an automaton of great sophistication, employing rule-based responses incorporated into its fundamental structure.
What rule could it have been following when it tried to suck me out into space?
You were using a blaster, and caused a breach which did not heal, said Lobot. You could have triggered a rule specifying that fires be extinguished by exposure to vacuum. Lando's cheeks wrinkled as he weighed Lobot's argument.
So you want us to start pushing buttons at random, is that it?
We know it responds to touch. We were probably wrong to conclude that it responds negatively. Lando continued to vacillate.
Still quiet outside, R2?
R2 chirped a single beep. Recognizable as yes. Looking back at Lobot, Lando shrugged and gestured with an open hand.
After you!
Nodding, Lobot unlocked and removed his gauntlets one at a time, clipping them to tool stays on the contact suit. Then he jetted to the nearest part of the enclosing wall, reached out both hands, and pressed the palms lightly against the surface. When nothing happened, he started sliding to his left. The wall of the chamber began to rise under his hands, as though it were shaping itself to an invisible mold.
My goodness gracious.
3PO suddenly cried out.
R2, do you see?
Lobot retreated hastily to the middle of the chamber, but the transformation continued. Broad discs appeared and grew into squat cylinders. Ridges defined long arcs across the display, shadowing the rippled patterns spilling down the curves of a hemisphere. Color appeared but did not overwhelm. There were swirls of a pale blue and spikes of a soft yellow, and none respected the boundaries of the geometries they overlaid. Lando's eyes twinkled with delight.
I never thought you were the artistic type, Lobot.
Returning to the wall, Lobot touched the drum-like surface of one of the cylinders. The chamber was suddenly filled with music, a haunting duet of intertwined melodies that rose and fell like swells in a gentle sea.
I'm not letting you have all the fun,
Lando said with a grin, peeling the makeshift glove off his right hand and jetting to the opposite wall. It answered his touch with a great rectangle pierced by two long channels and filled with finer detail than the sculpture it faced. Lando did not know the meaning of the pattern, but he could see the scar his blaster had left in it. A circular bite out of the upper edge of the rectangle, obliterating 20 or more of the myriad smaller cells within it. The damage did not dampen Lando's enjoyment for long. The two men flew about the chamber like nimble, persistent insects until they had tested its entire surface. There was something marvelous about the way a simple touch of the hand brought the empty chamber to life. But the most splendid discovery of all, in Lando's eyes at least, was the doorway that opened for him at one end of the chamber, and its twin, which Lobot manifested at the other. Lando did not know where either might lead them, but he much preferred an uncertain choice to no choice at all. In the captain's wardroom aboard Glorious, two pieces of metal rested on a table beside a contact suit gauntlet. The longer of them was badly twisted. The ends of both were scorched with matching burns. Colonel Pakpakat held the shorter of the two lightly between two fingers, turning it over for examination.
"You're certain?"
he asked. "Yes, Colonel," said Taisden. "This is the frame of a hired hand carryall, a common self-stabilizing equipment slant.
Ownership?"
The registry code indicates it is the property of a Hirko Nochit, a Babbitt adventure guide and one-time acquaintance of Lando Calrissian. We believe that the General acquired this, and certain other property, from Nochit in a Sabak tournament 2 years ago."
"Have you had it analyzed for biological identifiers?"
It was swept immediately after retrieval,
said Technical Agent Pleck.
"There are trace markers consistent with human handling, but I cannot confirm that either Calrissian or the cyborg is the source."
"Why not?"
"Sir, it's, a bit awkward. We have no bioprofile of the General to compare it to."
Pakpakat bared his teeth.
"A flag officer of the fleet, say nothing of his history for joining the rebellion and since leaving it. How is this possible?"
"I don't know, sir. We have found records that indicate his bioprofile was recorded at least 3 times, but the profiles themselves have disappeared, and the clerk of records on Cloud City refuses even to answer our inquiries, citing something he called the Founder's Contract."
Shaking his head, Pakpakat said,
Under his uniform, General Karashin remains a smuggler and a scoundrel. Was anything else found in the sweep, Pak?
Yes, Colonel, though I don't know what significance to assign to it.
Tell me what you can.
Yes, sir. We recovered a relatively large amount of an unidentified biological material from the facing of the sled. This area here.
the agent said, pointing.
The quantity is on the order of 2 million cells. I should say cell fragments, because most were mechanically damaged.
Mechanically, as if these pieces had been used as weapons.
No, sir. The distribution was too uniform, more like... Well, sir, more like you'd sat down and sanded the outside of the frame with a rough skin rat. I'm sorry, sir. I know that's rather unscientific.
You said the cells were unidentified.
Yes, sir. And they may stay unidentified. The leading theory is that they may be artificial cells, a mechanism rather than an organism. The genetic sequences are much too short and seem to have little extra material. With your permission, we'd like to use one of Glorious's hyperspace probes to send a sample back to the Exobiology Institute on Coruscant.
Pakpakat bared his teeth.
See to it, Lieutenant.
He growled.
It should have been done when you first thought of it.
The agent hurriedly left the room under the heat of Pakpakat's glare, and the colonel turned his attention back to Taysden.
Was anything else recovered from the location where these were found?
No, sir. Nothing else. Stendoff is still on station, sweeping the area, but it looks clean down to decimeter resolutions. Pakpakat picked up the short section of sled frame.
A most curious kind of flotsam, Agent Taysden. Difficult to construct a scenario to account for it.
Yes, sir.
Are all of our people off the Marauder now?
Yes, sir. The section came over with me, and Captain Garch had quarters assigned to them on X-Deck.
Then I suppose I have delayed as long as I can, hoping that these foolish orders would be withdrawn,
said Pakpakat.
Advise Captain Hansa that I am releasing Marauder from this command, effective immediately. He is to return his ship at best possible speed to Krenhner Sector Station and report to the Commodore there.
Taysden nodded. I'll see to it immediately, sir. Left alone in the wardroom, Colonel Pakpakat slowly cupped his right hand and began to smack it against the table, driving his friction pads against the retracted points of his nails. The pain proved unequal to the anger he was wrestling, so he methodically increased both the force and frequency of the blows. There was an eerie deliberateness to his self-abuse, and his face remained expressionless throughout. He did not stop until the pads were swollen and pulpy soft, and the pain shooting up through his arm and deep into his chest had bled off the restless need that impatience and frustration had bred in his Padrock gland, the fighter's heart. By that time, Marauder was ready to depart, and Pakpakat waited until he had watched it go, jumping toward Krenner the moment it cleared convoy radius. Then he turned to his recording log and began at last to dictate a report he did not want to make for a supervising committee he no longer could say he respected.
The little ships groping through the dark for a few short days. That is all your lives are worth to them. I never would have thought I would see such dishonor. I never thought I would feel such shame.
Over the next several hours, R2 added 20 chambers to his map of the Vagabond, numbering each in turn as the team visited it. To help them remember where they had been, he also recorded for each a fisheye hollow of what Lando had dubbed the pop-ups. So far, they had discovered 2 basic patterns for the pop-ups. 8 of the chambers were like the first. One side of the chamber would reveal a large figure that might have been a sigil, a sculpture, or symbolic writing. The opposite face would reveal a finely detailed geometric design that Lando and Lobot both were convinced was the map of a temple or small city. Somewhere in every map room was a key that triggered Kala music, though every song was different from the others. Apart from the music, the pop-ups in the map rooms appeared to be static. They remained on display as long as the team lingered. When the team moved on to another chamber and the connecting portal closed, the pop-ups collapsed and vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Next in sequence, after every map room, came one or more of what Lobot dubbed gadget rooms. In them, the team found a variety of mostly mysterious pop-ups that might move, change color, hum, or change shape when touched. But with a very few exceptions, the gadgets had no decipherable function, and none caused any detectable change in the status of the ship.
I still think these could be control rooms,
Lando said as they prepared to leave Chamber 20.
We just don't know what we're controlling. We could be driving the custodian crazy, lowering the heat in the freshers, and changing the channel on his Cosmicom service.
One welcome discovery was that when they entered a chamber by conventional means, through the portals, the chamber provided its own illumination. Power had become critical enough for R2 that back in Chamber 11, Lando had coupled him to 3PO for an energy transfusion. The protocol droid, carried everywhere by Lobot or R2, was consuming very little power directly.
Yes, by all means, you should take it on,
he said, looking down at his chest as Lando snapped the transfer cable into the recharge coupling.
I'm nothing but a burden to you. I don't know why you ever brought me on this mission. Master Lando, I'm completely useless to you. Give all my power to R2 and go on without me. Leave me here in the dark.
With a will, Lando resisted the temptation to take the droid at his word. Chamber 21 was another map room, the 9th. The sigil resembled a feathered V, embracing a cluster of fist-sized spheres. The map was an irregular pentagon, with one side twice as long as the others, and the same shape echoed in the open area at the very center. Neither Lobot nor Lando could find a music key, but their attempts seemed to trigger something quite different and startling. At first, there was just a pale pink glow, slowly pulsing in a structure near the long outer wall. Then, suddenly, that part of the map erupted in a gout of fire that leaped a full meter up from the wall. The team fell back in surprise.
They found us?
3PO cried.
R2, save yourself.
It's a holo, a recording, Lobot said.
No, it's real.
Lando said.
Look at your suit sensors. Wait, R2, don't!
He lunged toward the droid, who was busily unlimbering his fire extinguisher. By the time the struggle was over, the entire map had been replaced by a 5-sided black scar, and the chamber was half choked by a white soot smoke. Lando herded them back into Chamber 20, where they waited the 2 minutes they had learned it took for a room to reset. When they re-entered 21, the black scar was gone, and with it the smoke. With their backs practically pressed against the sigil, they then watched a replay. The initial blast came from the same structure, after the same pulsing glow. As the pillar of fire rose, the shock rippled out through the rest of the city, destroying the neat symmetry. The fire quickly fell back, but spread into a firestorm that raced across the shattered city and consumed it. In a matter of seconds, the wall was scorched black as before, the map destroyed.
R2, please run an analysis on the atmosphere in here,
Lando said. 3PO reported the results.
Oxygen 5%, oxygen 8%, oxygen 11%. Would you make up your mind?
The droid asked, clanging R2 on the dome with his working arm. It's not him, 3PO, said Lobot. The ship is restoring the chamber to its status before the fire for the next demonstration. He looked to Lando. These are history lessons. Something terrible happened to the Kala city that was under this sign.
Maybe this is our first clue about what happened to them.
Lando said.
But there's something else going on too. R2, what's the oxygen component now?
The answer, relayed through 3PO, was 15%.
Son of a... Lobot, 3PO, you stay here. R2, come with me. There's something we have to check.
Where are you going?
Back to Chamber 1, Express Lane. Sit tight. It won't be so long. We won't be sightseeing this time.
The patrol frigate Blood Price bore the colors of the Procketh Navy and the crest of Governor Foga Brill. Both were more prominent than the sigil of the Imperial Moff for Sector 5, which was consigned to the armor panel above the frigate's chin turrets. The displays mirrored the allegiances felt by Captain Ors Doggett and his crew of nearly 400. The officers owed their commissions and their postings to Brill, not to Grand Moff Gon. It was Brill who collected the commission fees and the annual posting assessments. It was Brill who paid off favors to wealthy families with command ranks that drew pay in goods and gold instead of Procketh scrip. The specialists and ratings, draftees all, owed the security of their families to Brill's promise of the protection of the Red Police for the daughters and wives of those who protected his power with their lives. To be drafted into the Navy was a far better thing than to be drafted into the slit mines or the foundries, or to be one of the hundreds rousted nightly from the riverbanks in Prahl and Scoth to dig their own graves. Graft and fear were inferior flavors of fealty, but they were the best Foga Brill could command, and they sufficed. "Course change maneuver complete, Captain," the navigator reported in a clear, loud voice. "Now heading 90, mark. -45, mark. 22 at Deep Patrol Standard,"
Towmaster, report,
said Doggett. The listening array Blood Price towed behind it on Deep Patrol was 100 times longer than the ship itself. It was a spiderweb of passive antenna cables, tiny noiseless amplifiers, steering jets, and tension vanes, with a drag gondola the size of a troop transport at the end of the antenna's main cable. The 3 crew members in the gondola had the difficult job of flying the array through the turn when Blood Price changed heading. If there was too little tension, the elements could tangle, or the whole array could tear itself apart in what the manuals called dynamic destabilization, and tow crews called tail whip. If there was too much tension through the turn, the likely result was an overstrain disconnect, and a 2-hour delay for the recapture procedure. The towmaster on Blood Price's last patrol had allowed 2 disconnects. Along with the gondola crew, he had spent the last half of the patrol in the brig, awaiting the return to Procketh and a court-martial on a charge of treasonable incompetence. So it was with great relief that his replacement announced, "The array turned cleanly and deployment is nominal,"
very well,
said Doggett.
Lieutenant Sojus, you are master of the bridge. I will be in my quarters, working on crew reviews. Inform Yeoman Kligo that she is to report to me there immediately.
Yes, Captain. When the portal closed after Lando and R2, Lobot watched, fascinated, as the smoke thinned and disappeared, the scar faded and vanished. Even the tiny white bits of soot smudging the outside of his faceplate seemed to evaporate. He watched on his suit monitor as the temperature plummeted 30 degrees to the slightly chilly norm for the Vagabond.
Pardon me, Master Lobot.
Yes, 3PO, what is it? Lobot said automatically, still distracted.
I was wondering, sir, if you could tell me, do droids meet the conditions of the test?
Lobot's head snapped around. What did you say?
The test of intelligence.
3PO repeated.
Am I sentient, like you, or simply another work of great ingenuity, like this ship?
Taken aback, Lobot looked away from the droid's waiting face as he groped for an answer. 3PO, you know,
Most droids are built to have self-aware artificial intelligence, especially third-degree droids like yourself.
But that must be something different than sentience.
3PO said.
Otherwise, the Senate of the New Republic would not consist solely of organics served by droids.
It is different, Lobot said as gently as he could. Artificial intelligence is programming. Wipe a droid's memory and it disappears. Replace it with different programming and a translator becomes a tutor, or a med droid becomes a chem droid.
I understand, sir,
said 3PO. He was quiet for a long moment.
Then can you tell me how it feels to be sentient? How is it different from what I feel?
I'm not sure that I can say,
Lobot replied slowly.
Perhaps it is a thing that you just know, because you are an organic and not a machine. Perhaps if I were sentient, I would not need to ask you these questions. I would know who I was.
Lobot said nothing for a time.
What do you think, 3PO?
He asked at last.
I do not know, Master Lobot,
the droid said.
But I have noticed that when someone speaks of memory wipes, I am seized by an inexplicable panic.
I don't find that inexplicable, said Lobot.
Really, sir?
Self-preservation is an elementary part of self-awareness, even artificial self-awareness. It's the part of us that feels that awareness which matters to us,
Lobot said.
I expect you would give that up.
He pointed at 3PO's immobile arm.
To keep your programming intact, as I would surrender this.
He pointed through his faceplate at his neural interface.
To preserve my consciousness.
I do not recall having this reaction when I was younger, sir,
3PO said.
Why, I have seen many droids of my acquaintance taken for memory wipes. I felt nothing but gratitude that their masters cared enough for their well-being to schedule proper maintenance.
The droid cocked his head.
My own maintenance record, I'm afraid, is something of a horror. It's a miracle that I can still function at all.
Lobot mused on that answer for a while.
Just out of curiosity, 3PO, have you thought about asking other droids what they think about this?
Yes, Master Robot,
3PO said.
But they seem not to understand the question. Why? One even had the ill manners to call me a computational defective with deviant specifications. Can you imagine?
I know something of such prejudice,
said Lobot, then sighed.
I don't have any answers for you, 3PO. All I can say is that the questions would seem to be worth revisiting when some time has passed.
Thank you, Master Lobot,
said 3PO.
I will do so.
Except for blind spots caused by blood price and the drag gondola, the towed array could scan several light hours in every direction. As the outermost of Procketh's 3 concentric spheres of defense, the first purpose of the deep patrol was to detect possible military threats long before they could come near the planet. For that reason, the ship's patrol route took it through the most likely final staging areas for an attack on Procketh, outside the range of its ground-based and orbiting sensors. But an equally important purpose was to intercept and claim as a prize any merchant or private vessel unwary enough to pass within reach. Ship seizures were not only an obligation, but an opportunity. A rich enough prize could advance the entire crew to a better post. And every deep patrol captain knew stories of other captains who had come home with a prize rich enough to earn the favor of Foga Brill himself. So, when Captain Doggett was called away from his examinations of the new female crew members, and saw the size of the contact on the optical displays, he quickly forgave the interruption.
What identification have you made?
He asked, peering over the shoulder of the security master.
None so far,
said the officer.
The image is too crude, and the target is silent in all spectral bands except the optical.
Interrogate the navigation transponder.
There is no transponder response at that location.
Range?
3.8 light hours, nearly at the limit of detection.
Captain Doggett weighed the possibilities. A warship of that size would be more than a match for a patrol frigate. He would need reinforcements from the inner fleet. but a freighter of that size would be a prize of the first rank, and one he would much prefer not to share with other captains. For a brief moment he considered cutting the array adrift, rather than allowing the hour necessary to reel it in. Abandoning the array would ensure that Blood Price was the first ship to reach the target. But if the contact proved spurious, or the target escaped, the loss of the array, or even any substantial damage to it, would cost him his post, if not his life.
Bring in the array.
Captain Doggett ordered.
Prepare the ship for hyperspace. Notify Patrol Command that we are in pursuit of an unidentified contact. Vector 091-066-053.
The navigation master turned at his station. But, sir, the last coordinate for the contact is 055.
I am sure you are mistaken.
Doggett said evenly.
Communications Master. Send the message as I instructed. Patrol Command will want to send additional ships to support us. Navigation Master. What would an error of 2 degrees over this distance mean?
The ships would be hours away at sublight, but too close to safely microjump. Understanding belatedly came to his eyes, and he glanced down at his console. Yes, sir. 053. Thank you for catching my error before it had any undesirable consequences.
Sleeping on the job again, I see. Did you know that you snore like a power saw in Ironwood?
Lando's voice, sharp and clear in the helmet's comm speakers, startled a dozing Lobot awake. He looked up to find Lando and R2 back in Chamber 21, the portal quickly closing behind them. Lando was holding his helmet under his arm and grinning broadly. Lando, what are you doing?
Master Lando, have you gone mad?
3PO demanded in alarm.
You must replace your helmet immediately, or you'll suffocate.
I've had it off for most of an hour now,
said Lando.
Didn't you wonder how anything could burn in an atmosphere that was 90% nitrogen and carbon dioxide?
It seems I did not have the necessary data to wonder, said Lobot, and I was thinking about other things.
Well, the answer is, it can't,
said Lando.
What I had to find out was whether it was just this room that had been oxygen-enriched.
And it apparently wasn't.
No, something happened while we were sleeping. Every chamber back to number 1 now has a breathable atmosphere. Go on, take your helmet off, try it.
The air was cold, dry, and sweet in Lobot's lungs. He looked at Lando in puzzlement. Why should this be?
You said it first. This ship isn't out to harm us. It was expecting visitors.
But we took a wrong turn after we entered, Lobot said thoughtfully, scratching his bald head with vigor. We weren't supposed to be wandering through the weapons system, which has its own specific environmental needs. We were supposed to be going through the museum.
Which was in cold storage until we arrived,
said Lando.
It makes perfect sense. Oxygen is highly reactive, a reducing agent. Keeping the oxygen pressure low and the carbon dioxide high protects the ship from fire, the exhibits from corrosion. Imperial Star Destroyers flood key equipment compartments with an NCO2 mixture before going into battle.
Then what happened to all the carbon dioxide that was in the air? Scrubbers?
The original and best kind,
Lando said.
The ship breathed it in, locked up the carbon, and gave back the oxygen. Lobot, don't you see? This ship is alive.
On Captain Doggett's orders, the Blood Price began charging its primary ion cannon battery immediately after exiting hyperspace. There would be no negotiations, no warning shots, no demands for surrender. Doggett did not intend to allow the captain of the intruding vessel any latitude at all. Unless a closer look at the target showed it to be a friendly, or a warship of cruiser class or heavier, Doggett intended to use the big guns quickly. The talking could begin after his gunners had disabled the other ship. "Target acquired," called the gunnery master. 20 seconds to full charge. "Target is confirmed unknown," called the senior analyst. "Design class is unknown. Estimated displacement class Gamma Plus. Detecting no weapons ports forward." "Target real velocity is 52 meters per second," called the navigation master. "Target closing velocity is 1,816 meters per second." Captain Doggett studied the image on his command display. It seemed almost too good to believe. A huge, unarmed and unprotected vessel barely crawling through space.
Are there any other Prakith vessels on the board?
"Showing the light cruiser Gorath and the destroyer Tobey, approximately 20 million kilometers astern," said the navigation master. "They won't be here for a while,"
Very well.
Doggett said.
Then we must do what we can ourselves. Gunnery master, you may fire when ready. Ion batteries only. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. Troop master, prepare your units for boarding.
Lando and Lobot had both temporarily shed their contact suits to stretch, scratch, and even scrub away their accumulated annoyances, sacrificing some of their precious water to restore a measure of dignity and comfort. The convenience of the waste management facilities in the suits alone dictated that they would eventually climb back inside them. As a practical matter, they also couldn't afford to sacrifice the maneuvering and communication systems. But neither man was eager to give up his unexpected freedom. The pieces of both suits floated around the chamber like dismembered corpses, while R2 and 3PO looked on, nonplussed by the display.
Pardon me, Master Lando, but should we not continue searching for the vessel's control room? I do not see that this has significantly altered our situation.
R2 suddenly began squawking shrilly.
I'm talking to them now. R2,
Said 3PO.
just you wait your turn. What? There's another ship? Heading directly toward us. R2, we're saved. I knew that the Colonel would come for us.
Slow down, 3PO. What's going on?
R2 says that the sensors on the limpet are detecting another ship on an intercept course.
Grabbing his helmet as it floated by, Lando shot a worried look toward Lobot.
What ship? Ask him what ship.
"The holoprojector," Lobot interrupted. "R2 can relay the signal from the imager." A few seconds later, half the chamber was filled with the limpet's wide-angle view of space outside the Vagabond's hull. The approaching ship was clearly visible to the extreme left of the projection, toward the bow.
Imperial escort frigate.
Lando said immediately.
The original KDY design with the heavy stuff forward. It looks like the gun ports are open, too.
Shouldn't we signal it somehow, Master Lando?
Asked 3PO. "It's not from our armada, 3PO, said Lobot.
The only signal I want to send that ship is a wave goodbye,
said Lando, reaching out and touching the wall of the chamber.
Come on, old lady, don't wait around for an introduction.
Master Lando, R2 says that there are 2 other ships approaching as well, but much farther away. Perhaps one of them is Glorious.
Not coming from that direction, it isn't. Oh, hell!
The bow of the onrushing frigate had suddenly disappeared behind the yellow-white plasma bubble of an ion cannon burst. A fraction of a second later, the holoprojection turned a crackling white, then disappeared. R2 yelped unhappily. At the same time, the ship shuddered under them. "The limpet's been fried," Lobot said, spinning in midair as he struggled to pull the lower half of his contact suit up over his legs. "R2 isn't getting anything from it now." Lando pressed his palm against the wall, hoping to feel the tremor of a hyperspace jump beginning.
Of all the luck, what's going on?
He demanded.
Why is she waiting so long to jump?
They fell silent as one, listening to the ship, hoping to hear her sinews groaning in protest as the jump engines punched her across into hyperspace, and fearing any sounds that might mean their journey would be ending here, a long way from home. The captain of the cruiser Goroth was cursing the name of the captain of the frigate Blood Price even before his ship's forward scanners lit up with the glow of a battle begun. When he saw the frigate open fire on the strange vessel, his fury knew no bounds.
I swear, this man will dig his own grave, and I will see his children bury him alive there,
the captain said with an icy venom.
He will hear his daughters screaming, his mother pleading, while his lungs fill with dirt and his eyes are ground blind by sand.
They were too far away, the image too jumpy and coarse to tell what effect Blood Price's barrage had had on its target. But they were close enough to witness what followed. Together with the crew of Tobe, they were the only witnesses. The great hull of the target brightened fore and aft, and something almost invisible struck out across the emptiness toward Blood Price. Seconds later, the frigate exploded with a ferocity that could only mean the ionization reactor had gone critical. It vanished from the sensor displays.
Too quick for you,
the captain of the Goroth said coldly. Meanwhile, the intruding vessel was turning away from the shattered hulk, away from Procketh and toward the rim.
Notify Tobe to prepare for hyperspace. Propulsion master, ready on my mark,
the captain cried out.
We will erase this humiliation and capture this invader ourselves.
A bright circle of light flared out around the vagabond.
Now,
the captain screamed.
Match headings. After them!
The captain's crew was well trained to his voice. Goroth jumped into hyperspace close enough behind the vagabond to be able to detect her quarry ahead by its soliton wake.
Now! We have them,
the captain said with grim satisfaction.
Wherever they are going, we will be there. They are ours.
Colonel Pakpakat's new orders read simply,
Mission terminated effective your receipt this notice. Break off all operations immediately. NRI Operations Center.
This will not do,
he said, and swept out of his quarters. The threat ruffles blossoming down his back and the crimson expanse on his throat warned away any who might otherwise have tried to speak to him on his way to the bridge.
Secure channel isolation,
he said as he dropped his body into his combat lounge. The enclosing shell came forward from the back of the chair and closed him in.
NRI Operations Center, Coruscant's highest priority.
It took several seconds for the hypercom link to be made and verified.
Operations?
Said a briskly professional voice.
Go ahead, Colonel Pakpakat.
I need to talk directly to General Riken.
I'll see if he's available, Colonel. One moment.
Pakpakat's impatience made the wait seem longer than it was.
Brigadier Colomus, Operations Senior Staff,
said a new voice.
How can I help you, Colonel?
Pakpakat showed his teeth.
You can help me talk to General Riken, as I asked.
General Riken is not available at the moment,
said Colomus.
If you have any questions about your orders, I should be able to resolve them. I was in the planning loop for the Telcon expedition.
I know who you are, Brigadier,
said Pakpakat.
When General Riken becomes available again, please advise him that his last orders were garbled in transmission. I will require a verified voice confirmation to proceed.
I can give you that, Colonel.
No, sir. I'm afraid you cannot.
Pakpakat relaxed into the cushions and left the isolation shell up. The callback came 24 minutes later.
General Riken,
Pakpakat said with an acknowledging nod. Colonel, Brigadier Colomus tells me that you have a problem with your orders, which for some reason only I can resolve. Would you care to explain what's going on?
Sir, I must contest the decision to terminate the mission. This is a betrayal of...
Colonel, this is not open for discussion.
There are 6 men dead and a contact team still missing.
Colonel, those facts are not relevant to the decision.
Not relevant, you.
No, Colonel, they are not. All agents must be considered expendable, always, and your ships are needed elsewhere, most especially Glorious.
With all due respect, sir, you don't understand the ramifications.
Colonel, I wouldn't finish that sentence. Raiken said sharply, your reports have been carefully reviewed. The probability of any positive outcome at this point doesn't justify further investment. The decision has been made, and your exception is noted. The mission is terminated. Bring them home, Colonel.
Sir, I request permission to take an all-volunteer team and continue the search in General Calashan's yacht. Lady Luck, this would not...
Denied.
Then I request immediate leave in order to continue the search on my own.
Denied. All leaves have been cancelled due to the crisis in Farthak sector.
Then you leave me in an impossible position.
Why is that, Colonel? Do you find it impossible to follow orders? Parkbakat bared his teeth.
General, Audiobook does not leave the bodies of comrades in the hands of the enemy, ever.
For the first time since the call had begun, there was silence. I understand, Colonel, but I can't help you.
I think you can, General.
I'm listening.
You said that all agents must be considered expendable. I am asking you to count me among the missing from the Telgcon expedition. Because even if I did return, I would still be here in ways which would compromise my ability to do any other job for you.
This is that important to you, Raiken said, settling back in his chair. Even though these missing men were not part of your command, flouted your orders, and are principally responsible for the failure of your mission.
One's comrades and allies do not come neatly out of a mold, General.
Pakbakat said.
They are inevitably a mixed lot, and never without flaws. And I find I often must hope for as much tolerance from them, in that regard as I am able to offer to them.
Raiken pursed his lips. Very well, Colonel. I will extend you a little tolerance. Lady Luck, no more than 3 additional volunteers, and whatever unexpended mission supplies you choose, and the yacht can carry. Report any substantive developments promptly. And, Colonel...
Sir.
My tolerance is fairly inelastic. Don't try to stretch it.
Thank you, General.
Slightly more than an hour later, Pakbakat, Captain Bijo Hamax, and technical agents Plek and Taysden watched from Lady Luck's tiny flight deck as the cruiser Glorious and the escort Ketamore turned together and jumped toward Coruscant.
It begins,
said Pakbakat to the empty sky. Penga Rift found the pilot of IX-26 keeping a lonely watch over the bodies on Malta Obex. What took you so long? He demanded. You were supposed to be here days ago. Copy. This is Johto Eccles, came the reply. Sorry about the delay. Frankly, we weren't even expecting you to still be here. Our original sponsor withdrew just before we lifted, and then we got word about the accident. We were going to have to go to a contract ambulance to recover Craddock and Josala when another sponsor came along and picked up the contract. This is all news to me, the pilot said. I don't know why I wasn't recalled if the NRI pulled out. Who's sponsoring you now? A private collector, name of Drayson, said Dr. Eccles. He hopes to authenticate some Kella artifacts. I think he's going to be disappointed, and very expensively so. But it helps us, and we'll do what we can for him. Do you still have a good fix on the bodies? Affirmative, Penga Rift, said the pilot. Nothing's moved down there since the avalanche, unless you want to count the snow that's fallen on top. You're in for a cold dig. We're ready for one. Then tell me how you want the data, so I can light this candle and get out of here, the pilot said.
because this is hands down the creepiest duty I've pulled in 16 years, and I have a great need to get myself somewhere warm and crowded, and soon. Understood, said Eccles. Ready to receive your coordinate system reference data. We'll take the next watch here at Maltho, Bex.